Hey everybody. This video is going to go over the material for the writing process, the rhetorical situation. So that tab in the week 1 module. Before this video, you were asked to do the book war exercise and then go through the PowerPoint on the rhetorical situation. So for this video, I'd like to talk a little bit about that exercise that you did on the book war essay, and then go through the highlights of the PowerPoint with you guys as well. So starting with the book war exercise, hopefully you've completed that one already. You were asked to read an essay and then answer some questions about it. And the nice thing about this essay book war is not only is it a lead-in to the material on the rhetorical situation, but it also is an example of a personal narrative, which is the first formal essay that you guys will be writing for this class. Don't worry about that yet, though. We'll start talking about it next week. But it is nice that you're already sort of getting a feel for what a good narrative does. So I'm going to kind of go back and forth between the rhetorical situation and the narrative aspects of this essay. I'm not going to go into detail about any of the questions, the answers to the questions, because I want to see your responses, and then I'll give you some feedback when I grade them. But I do want to just look a little bit at the questions that I asked after you read the essay. So the first one asked you to list the plot points of the story. Basically what that means is like the events, the major events of the story. You may have had a more detailed list than what I'm about to give, and that's perfectly fine. But basically, you know, our narrator, Wang Ping, she goes outside and has this encounter with her neighbor. She and her neighbor start this underground book exchange, and then her mother destroys all the books. So it's really only 3 big events that happen. What I want to point out to you about this, though, is think about how we tell a story. You know, it's very clear, the order of the events of the story. Nothing's confusing about it. And she starts in one spot and obviously ends in another, and a good bit of time has passed between those 2 events. From the time she has the encounter with her neighbor to the time her mom destroys all the books, a good bit of time has already transpired, yet the essay is pretty short. So it's an interesting trick to look at how she passed over the times that she didn't want to get into a lot of detail on. Because you may pick a topic for your personal narrative in the next few weeks that, isn't just one single event that happens in one moment, that it's something that transpires over a period of time, like this story did. So how do you write about that moment, that experience, without it dragging out and ended up being like a 10 or 12 page essay? Because we don't want that. So this is an interesting story to come back to and use as an example. The second question asked if the writer captured your interest. I'm going to read your responses to that. I'm always very interested in how students respond to this essay. But the main thing I want you to think about here, though, is, if it did capture your interest, how did she do that? How did she capture your interest? And how can you make sure you do the same thing when you write your story? If she didn't capture your interest, what was missing for you? And what would you have done differently? Again, just thinking about what you yourself will do when it's time for you to write your narrative. The third question asked you what the topic of the essay is. And it says it should be pretty short and concise, perhaps just one sentence. There are different ways that you could go about wording the topic of this, but I'll let you know in your homework assignment if you were in the ballpark of what the topic of the essay is. The fourth question asks you what makes the writer's perspective unique. Obviously this is her personal experience. So if you're telling something from the heart and you're being truthful to the story, chances are you're going to have a pretty unique perspective to start with. This one was really interesting because it's not something that any of us experienced maybe we don't even really know about the Chinese Cultural Revolution. Who knows? So something to keep in mind, though, how can you make your story interesting and unique? The fifth question, what do you think her purpose was? You know, what was she trying to accomplish? What was she hoping that we as readers would take away from the essay? Again, there's actually a variety of answers for this one too. And that's an interesting point to keep in mind is, you know, you need to have, you know, a reason when you write something, but your reasons might be numerous. You know, there may not be just one. Who do you think she wrote the essay for? You know, what types of readers would be interested in it? Again, this could have many answers, but something that you want to be thinking about anytime you write. The number 7, it says the author's story clearly takes place in a different time and place. How does this knowledge affect how we react to the essay? You know, knowing the time period and what was going on in China at that time, and what, you know, what life is like today, what the world is like today. How do those outside factors affect how we read the story? Right. So anything that, you know, any of those questions, your answers aren't going to be wrong. Some might be more right on point than others, but I will kind of give you an idea when I grade them, you know, if you were going in the right direction with your answers. But I just wanted to point out, you know, why the essay was useful to us, you know, thinking about how you can apply some of her techniques when you go to write your own narrative. But then also, if you noticed, most of those questions were pretty much asking you about the rhetorical situation for this essay. So we're going to talk about that PowerPoint now, because it goes right along with the questions for that exercise. And it might seem weird that I had to do the exercise before reading the PowerPoint, but that was kind of the point, was to get you thinking about something without all of the terminology yet. But the PowerPoint then kind of labels and names the things that you were just asked to think about for the essay. So the rhetorical situation, you may have never even heard of it. What we're talking about here is everything that's going on outside of your head and then inside your head as you begin the writing process. So some of this stuff is happening before you ever put pen to paper or fingers to a keyboard. You want to think about the rhetorical situation before you start writing. You want to keep coming back to it as you write, because it's the foundation of any piece that you undertake. So going through the PowerPoint, the 3 big elements of the rhetorical situation are topic, angle, and purpose. Topic, this is not your general topic. This is your very specific topic. You know, so for Book War, the topic isn't the Chinese Cultural Revolution. It is a much more specific topic having to do with a specific experience from the author's childhood, right? So you want to make sure that you are laser focused in your topic, because if it's too big, it's going to be too much to write on. Or you're going to attempt it anyway and just gloss over things, and it's not going to have an impact. The angle, so when you think of someone who has an angle, you know, they're trying to get in a certain way. What is your angle with this piece you're writing? You know, what are you bringing to the table that's new or different? How are you going to make this unique? Because there's this theory that all the stories of the world have already been told. You know, all the stories of human existence have already been told. What we do now is just figure out new ways of telling those stories. So if you were to write, you know, a personal narrative, and I will probably mention this example again later, if you want to write a personal narrative on the birth of your first child, I mean, that's great, and I'm sure it was truly significant and memorable for you, but what are you going to bring to that essay that's different than every other first child birth essay out there? So if that makes sense, it's what are you bringing that's different? How are you making it interesting? The purpose, this might be the most important part of the rhetorical situation. What is your purpose? What are you trying to accomplish with this essay and with this topic? What do you want your readers to walk away with? What do you want their takeaway to be? You know, do you want them to be inspired? Do you want them to be moved to action? Do you want them to be scared? Do you want them to laugh? What's your purpose? What are you trying to convey to your readers? You know, what do you want them to feel or think? And then that brings up the fourth point of the rhetorical situation. Who are your readers? Who is your audience? It's not just me, the instructor. You know, I always tell students, pretend like, you know, you're just sitting around one day and this idea comes into your head and you just have to sit down and write about it. You know, who are you hoping reads it? You know, who's going to be affected or moved or interested in the thing you're writing? And then the last point of the rhetorical situation is context. And context, when you get to that slide, which is almost towards the end, it has several components to it as well. The first one is voice and tone. So what I'm talking about here is your voice. How are you going to write this and make sure that it sounds like you? You got to make sure that you're being genuine and true to yourself when you write. And then going along with that, what type of tone is appropriate? You know, sometimes we can be playful. Sometimes we can add a little sarcasm. Sometimes we can add some humor. Sometimes we can be kind of dark and somber. Sometimes we can be apologetic. Sometimes we can be persuasive, and then other times downright argumentative. So what type of tone is going to be best for this piece, considering what your purpose is and who your audience is? Then that'll help you decide what type of tone to use in your writing. The other parts of context are place, medium, and social and political influences. Where will your readers be reading this piece? In your hypothetical, you know, world where you just had to write about this topic, how are they going to read it? Is it going to be, you know, a paper? Is it going to be a presentation? Will it be a podcast or a video? For this class, obviously, you're going to be mostly writing documents, so keep that in mind. But there might be other classes where you're asked to do all different kinds of projects, and you want to keep that in mind when you build the content for it. The last item there, social and political influences, social trends, economic trends, and political trends. So what is going on in the world around us that influences what you're writing about and how you're writing about it? And how do those outside influences affect how your reader might interpret your piece? You know, it's not necessarily, trying to shelter people or not hurt their feelings. It's just preparing for what their reaction might be, right? So all of those things, those 5 components, make up the rhetorical situation. And these might not be things that you've ever really spent a lot of time thinking about when you've written essays or done other projects before, but it's so important. I can't tell you how many times I've received rough drafts of essays from students, and they just need so much work, almost like going back to the drawing board, starting from scratch kind of work, because the rhetorical situation, the foundation was just lacking completely. So, you know, you have to think about all of these things before you get started. Otherwise, you are putting yourself in a position to have to do a lot more work down the road. So we're going to be talking a lot about the rhetorical situation as you guys are working on your very first essay. You're going to be doing a homework assignment that in part asks you to consider the rhetorical situation as well. So we're going to be getting some practice at it. But I just wanted to give you an overview of what it's all about and why it's important. If you have any questions about any of this material before you start the week 1 assignments, please let me know, because I want to make sure that you're in a good spot before you get started on the work for it. So otherwise, good luck on the homework assignment for it.